So there's this concept that's been on my mind recently, within the last several weeks especially. It's something that I had a pretty unique experience with, and this was about 5 years ago that I had an ego death. And the concept of ego death is very complex because there are multiple ways to achieve an ego death, and the way that I understand it is through using mushrooms. I think the way of achieving ego death through spiritual practices and meditation over a life's journey and being able to remain in that state, I think that is the ultimate goal. But that is a different kind of life, to achieve that. And so you can achieve an ego death through psychedelics, specifically with mushrooms for me. And I wanted to actually just share kind of the full story of my ego death. Um, it was actually it was beginning of April 2020, 2023. So it's been, yeah, 3 years almost exactly. But this event impacted my life significantly, and it happened so fast that the flip occurred in my mind. I've mentioned before on this channel, but I suffered from a lot of different mental health issues my whole childhood. They were severe. Social anxiety, OCD, all of that kind of looped into one with the depression. And as that happened, I was in fight or flight 24/7. I was paranoid. I was thinking someone was judging me. I was judging other people. I was in a kind of a difficult situation at home, just a lot of controlling, a very controlling environment, which limited my expression. And the more my expression was limited, the more I went in my mind. So when if someone is not able to express themselves fully, they are essentially that excess information that they could be spitting out, and they're having to cause like a delusion in their mind to hold on to that information and hold on to it. And the more you hold on to information and you're not fluently expressing it through any, whether it's journaling, talking, it could be therapy, it could be friends, talking to yourself, but you have to express what's on your mind, and if you don't, it will build up and build up. And so that was my first 20 years of life, was that intense. So all that compacted into that. Then there was a 5-year journey of trying to figure things out but not really succeeding, like some small advancements here and there, but also regression. Didn't really I wasn't able to elevate, you know past that. Antidepressants were not it for me. They just numbed it. So I never really found the answer for about a 5-year stretch. I was less in my head, but I was not fully being myself. I was very, very in my mind about pretty much everything you can think of, just day-to-day tasks, a lot of it social situations, a lot of just I was unaware at how deep my mind was in this like ongoing cycle of chatter. And essentially I moved to Colorado in June of 2020, and once I moved, I immediately, one, as I felt the freeness out here, but I started, soon after I started, partaking in mushrooms and some different other substances, but specifically mushrooms is what was the actual way my life turned around. So when I talk about mushrooms to people or friends or whoever, I I have a different relationship with it. Um, you can have fun on it, you can party on it, you can do a lot of things with mushrooms. You You can do anything with it. Microdose, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. But the severity of, or the intensity and of the impact of the event that happened specifically, that kind of shaped how I view them now. Sorry, one sec. How I view them now. And even though I can have fun with them, I understand the impact they had on my life, and that's why I'm passionate about not just, meditation and, evolving consciousness through spiritual practices or different psychological practices, but mushrooms and how they quiet the mind, which is the exact solution that I needed. I needed my mind to be silent. And then once it got silent, all this information started pouring into me. Constant just feedback, so many realizations every time I took mushrooms. And that was a multi-year process where I was doing that. It was mostly intentional, and it was very, very intense, because it was probably every 2 months I was taking, more than a gram of mushrooms and having a decent trip, occasionally less than that, occasionally more than that, but doing that sometimes more frequently. But I was using it and getting all these downloads, and as I got the downloads, I was unlocking my mind, basically, because it was so rooted in the survival and the paranoia, and just so scattered that I really wasn't able to see life for what it is. And not being able to do that for so long, once I got on the other side of it, I started seeing how there's this different side of life that is just, it's more internal, in terms of, you can do the external things and the material things and the fun things in life, but having the internal awareness of what you're doing, and having control of impulses and control of all these things, that is a way, completely forgot what I was saying, but anyways, yes. So on what they essentially were doing for me was allowing me into my mind. The more I got into my mind, the more I started deciphering through all of the bullshit that had piled up for 20 plus years. It was actually 25 years. And the thing is with that, I started realizing that my own ego had so many not just delusions, but I had to overcompensate, because in order to feel confident and feel self-worth and feel these things, I had to kind of trick my mind, and would use, kind of judging others as a way to feel confident, which is something people do. And I experienced that, and it's a very shitty way to live. And the reason I started doing it was because I had such low everything confidence. My expression, pretty much everything was just low. I was weak. I was very weak-minded. Couldn't persevere through anything. And as you're going through life like that, and then you come to the other side of it, I started realizing that my own ego started to need ego dissolution, in terms of with mushrooms and meditation, but also not viewing the ego as bad, but I realized that I had built it up so much that it had the tightest grip on me. Not everyone, I would say, needs a psychedelic ego death. However, for me, I believe it was necessary. I believe it was necessary, and I essentially was calculated with it, and I wasn't sure when it was gonna happen in one of the next mushroom trips, but basically, I'm gonna just share the story. This video may be an hour, but I feel like I've forgotten about this event, and I need to remember it because of the impact it had on me, and just I wouldn't be where I'm at in life without this event, because it drastically just altered my consciousness and the way I view everything in the world. Um, I was already inch by inch getting to that point, but I was so far away from it that this experience allowed so much of the bullshit that had piled up and the biases and all these things that had just, aversion, my mind was just, it was constantly up and down, like seeking things, wanting things, or not wanting things. It was very much just black and white judgment. And I knew that it was going to happen. And so at some point, I was like, I'm going to go for it. So it did not go as planned because I decided to go skiing with my friend on his birthday. And we like to maybe take a half a gram, maybe a gram of mushrooms, depending, and we'll ski for like 7 hours. It's amazing. It really is. And we did that, but I had a lot on my mind going into it. And I was skiing down the hill, I remember, and my ego was, I was kind of going through it just briefly. It wasn't too intense, but I remember I remember saying, like, kind of talking shit to my ego, and was like, basically like saying, fuck you. I don't know why I was doing it, but I was like consciously like talking shit to my ego and like breaking it down. And I didn't think much of it because we had just taken them like 20 minutes before. We get to the bottom of the mountain, we decided to go smoke a joint. And if you've ever done mushrooms and you've ever smoked weed with it, it just magnifies it. And it adds in another layer to the trip. I think purely taking mushrooms is preferred, but if you add it in, it can blast you off to another level. And so we sat down in his car to smoke. This is wild. So basically, as we were listening, I remember the song we were listening to, I remember everything. This day, I can tell you like play by play for like 2, 3, 4 hours. And so we get to the car, we start smoking. As soon as I hit the joint a few times, I immediately, it was, after it was probably 3 or 4 hits, all of a sudden, my mind blasted off, and I instantly, within seconds, I was observing myself. You know how Google Maps, Apple Maps, how they zoom and you can just keep zooming and zooming and zooming? My mind literally did that, and I observed it from like a Google Maps type. Like I blasted up into, it was like into space. And as it happened, like within seconds, I was just sitting there and I went, oh fuck. And I didn't know, it happened so fast. And as it happened, for the next 30 to 40, I didn't know what happened. It was wild. Just this zoom out, and then all of a sudden I'm observing myself in like this way that's I'm like roasting myself. I'm being super critical of myself. And it was time to go back out there and ski. And I was like, oh fuck, like this is rough. I don't know what's going on. And the one thing that if you do psychedelics properly is the one thing you have to do is let go. And it was just not expected to be this happening at a fucking ski resort. So I was trying to fight through it. And for the next 30 minutes from that moment till about 30 to 45 minutes later, what happened was we made it back to the ski lift. I was stumbling around, moving so slow, got on the ski lift, which was like 20 to 30 minute process of getting there. As we're on the ski lift going up, I'm going through it so hard that I literally had my phone and I was trying to play like the happiest music ever. I was trying to find anything to like get me out of what was happening. And as it kept going on, the mountains, as we're riding up the ski lift, the mountains are moving and shaking. It was already dark and windy. And I was just like, oh my God, what is going on? I tried to like communicate with my friend about what was happening, and like he wasn't seeing the same thing. So it wasn't, I realized I was fucked. And so we get up to the top. I ski my very, very best. And as I'm skiing, I ended up going from the lift down probably like 1 minute of skiing. And essentially my vision started blurring and everything was like melting, and like my visuals were all just insane. And not only did I start losing the visuals, I started losing control of my body. And so my legs started becoming very heavy and like noodleish, and like I couldn't feel them. And I actually don't know if this is a thing normally with an ego death, but what happened next is I was trying to do my very best, and like I lost complete control. I could feel it like happening. Lost complete control of like my physical functioning. My legs were going out, and so I posted up on the side of this mountain edge, and I was able to get kind of away from the slope, but I was able to flag my friend when he came by. He came to check on me, and he was the reason that I was allowed to have this ego death experience, because I was going through it so hard. I didn't know what was happening. I was freaking the fuck out. I was not in my body. I did not know who I was. Everything was just, it was like flipping. And I've had bad trips before, but this was like way more powerful and different. And my friend started talking to me and telling me that, like, as I was trying to explain what was happening, he was like, dude, you are having an ego death. And as he said it, I realized, because I was communicating to him what was going on, and like nothing made sense. My mind was like, it was starting like the process of like going to the pure like void. And once he was explaining it to me, he was like, you need to enjoy this and like relax. He was kind of telling me, I don't know word for word, but it was essentially, relax into this. This is like amazing. And then as he did, I started instantly, I started breathing and breathing and breathing. And I kept taking these breaths, and then all of a sudden, within like 1 to 2 minutes, everything was like, my mind slowly for the next like 1 to 2 hours, it started just going to this like completely pure blank slate, where I was so confused that, like, even in that state, it was magical, but I was so confused. I had to let go of a couple things. And I vividly remember I was at the point where I was literally standing there. Time was not there. I didn't know what that was. My mind I remember asking my friend, who am I? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, who am I? What is my name? I honestly, like, I didn't know what my name was. It was that, my mind was that blank. And I was like alert, and like at that point I was like, the relief had happened because I started understanding and breathing. But as my mind was blank, and I eased into that process and kept going further and further and further, nothing made sense. Like, my mind got this blank, like I didn't know who I was. He was explaining to me, you're John, you have a dog named Bear, you do this. He was talking to me. And I remember I was freaking out at times, because I was like, am I stuck here? Basically, am I stuck here? Or is it like, I thought that was my new life. Like, I didn't know what it was. And so he was like, no, give it like about 2-3 hours and you'll be back. He was like, you'll be good. And he knew. And so as I started understanding that, I went more into that blank slate, and there was like some emotions came up, and a lot of like crying, but then also this, it was so intense, and like I didn't have control of my legs for over an hour. I tried standing up. I couldn't move. Like, I really could not move. And as, leaving there, I did not understand what the impact of that was. I didn't know what it meant, really. And my ego death, I do feel like, is different than probably others. I'm not exactly sure, but I think a lot of people's ego deaths are more spiritual, potentially. Mine was more like psychological. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it just seems like mine was more just this inner battle with my own mind that had been ruling me and tearing me down for so long that I was unaware of it, and just going at it. Like, it just fucked my world up. And going on from that, just life, I mean, before that, just day-to-day tasks were completely different from that point on. Just simply driving. I used to drive a certain way. It was, kind of cutting people off, kind of getting angry, everyone's done it before. But when you're driving and you feel like you're so sped up from this life you've been living, and you don't know how to stop, you're living in a sped up, and then you're consuming caffeine, and you're doing all these things at once. Basically, I was sped up with all the fight or flight, and the judgment, and the shame, and the guilt, embarrassment, all these things. I was sped up. And being able to slow down, damn it, I forgot what I was saying. But yeah, just I know what I was saying. Going to the complete opposite spectrum of that. There was the first, so when I was driving after that, like, I was so polite. I was just like going through driving in this way that was like, why have I been doing this thing this same way for 8 years that I've been driving? Why am I always angry and rushing and frustrated and impatient and angry? Everyone knows drivers like that. And like, I'm not trying to roast anyone out here, but if you drive like that, you're probably unhappy. I know some. And it's just like, that task alone, I was just so mind blown. I couldn't believe that I had been doing this thing in this way. And then I started doing other things. I used to eat, for example, eating. I used to just eat, eat, eat until I was so full. That's how I ate every meal. I ate until I couldn't eat anymore. Like I ate. And I started being like, why am I doing this? What have I been doing this for all these years? Like I was unconscious as to internal behaviors and patterns. And all of a sudden, those insights that I had been getting leading up to this through meditation and mushrooms, as it was like slowly stepping up a ladder, as I started going more and more, then I started just the downloads. It was just overflow of information. I wish I had been documenting it. I did with some journaling, but I also was having a tough time integrating all these things that I was learning because it was so rapid. I mean, when you close part of your mind off for 25 years, like large parts of the brain were not functioning, or they were over functioning in other areas, fight or flight, the amygdala, and that it caused physical stress. It caused physical pain in my body. I was able to realize later on that a lot of, it was so severe that the physical pain was there in my spine, and I had suffered from a lot of back issues, with scoliosis and arthritis and herniated disc. And a lot of that was because of how intense my first 25 years were, just being unconscious. And I don't know how else to put that. Like, it's hard to explain to someone, but like awakened my spirit. It awakened my soul. It awakened who I am behind all of the bullshit conditioning that piled up in my mind. And when that piles up and you're not able to get out of it, you're looking at life through a completely different lens. And this event allowed me to start, it was 6 months to a year. Well, I would say the first 3 to 4 months were more so a lot of confusion and a lot of it was like some highs for sure. Like, it was so freeing, and I was so much freed up in my mind, and just instantly less anxiety, instantly less compulsions and I'm very impulsive, because of how I was essentially on pure impulse mode when you're unconscious. And so you're just giving into every impulse, and you have no control of anything. You're getting snatched around. So going to the opposite of that, I started being, the last 6 years has been about controlling. If I do not stay on a path with some sort of mindfulness, whether it's yoga or cooking or meditation or anything, if I'm not doing one of those things and I'm not getting enough of that, my mind will start resorting back to the old ways, as a lot of people do with meditation. And on this path, you do regress if you stop. That's normal. But my mind goes back to some of those same patterns, and I can get stuck back in them. It's pretty wild. But yeah, so this expression aspect that I talked about earlier, it is the biggest thing for me. And not just because of how much I limited my expression for so long. And I actually, my first 7-8 years, I was super curious. I was outgoing. I asked so many questions. My family always talks about it. And then there was a switch that started happening as a lot of the life was getting beat out of me, not physically, but the environment that I was in. That curious soul that was going through life started becoming smaller, more focused on judgment, more focused on, shame, and just feeling guilty and feeling lack of self-worth, and so many just negative things that took over my mind. And that just continued and only got worse and worse and worse. And it's very intense, thinking about it, but it allows me to have a different perspective on life because of the drastic difference my life has been since specifically that experience. Essentially having a full-on ego death and trying to pick up the pieces after that. And those first few months were just I didn't know what was going on. And then I started realizing that I could start doing what I wanted with my mind, and I started becoming the person who I want to be, literally. And I started, because I had such a blank slate, I started having to go explore and figure out what I liked. I didn't know what I liked. I really didn't. I did things habitually as a kid, but just playing the sport and throwing a fishing rod and shooting a gun and doing whatever task that your family is into doesn't mean that you love that. And so I had to start exploring things, and it was so hard because I felt lifeless because I didn't know what I liked, and I was just trying things, but also kind of nervous to try things. And then I started just doing, as I started experimenting with more things, it took multiple years. And then I started finding some little hobbies. I cook a lot. I do a lot of yoga. Those are probably the two of the things and walks with my dog at the park or hiking. Those are the three things I would say I enjoy most, or I just do to kind of reset. And I was able to not just do the thing to do it, I realized that these are things that help bring me back to ground and allow my mind to relax. And there's so many things that on the path after the ego death, it was very, very disorienting and challenging because I really didn't know who I was at all, because it was all a lie. It was all just bullshit in my mind. And so the next 1 to 2 years, I started working on a lot of different things to build up that person that I wanted to be. And not like I knew it, and it wasn't calculated. I was just figuring it out as I went, and it was fucking hard. And it started showing me, that's when I started seeing sides of myself that were not weak, like I mentioned earlier. Being so weak mentally, I started realizing that I can power through shit. Started realizing that I can go sit in a cold bath for 7 minutes if I want to, or if I need to, or kind of just things that I never was able to do. This is the other part of it too. I was never able to push through anything. And I started realizing with workouts, with the sauna, with cold plunge, with a lot of physical things. It started with physical. And as I started doing things, I started really, really, really pushing myself. Not torturing, but pretty fucking rough. And I was just really I started challenging my mind so much, and I started getting control over a lot of things, and I just started trying to do as many hard things as possible with cold, heat, mostly cold and heat, as much as possible. That was what actually started helping me shape my mind, because starting my days off with that allowed me to just drop so much stress and anxiety and be able to experience things in that natural state. And then as I was doing that, I started on top of that going at a lot of different behaviors. That was the work was just starting. I then started going at all these different behaviors that I have been just unconsciously doing at work with friends, being passive aggressive, telling a lie in this situation, doing this, not making eye contact, so many social things that I was kind of just fucking up. As I started realizing that, I started just doing all of this mental work socially. That was the biggest thing for me, was the social aspect at that point. You know, I didn't go from that point to like deep meditations, or I was meditating, but it wasn't like I went straight into all this spiritual stuff. I was still just trying to, like, when I mean spiritual, I mean like I wasn't focused on any spiritual concepts at that point, because of the conditioning of my mind with in a Christian home, and, you know, having that on my psyche 24/7. I kind of went to a phase of a year or so after that, especially, of like kind of being agnostic or atheist. Just, I didn't care about any of it, and I didn't want to know. So like Eastern mysticism, or like any of it really, and like Christianity, any of it, I just didn't want anything to do with it. Even though I was meditating, I wasn't really doing anything specific. It was very generic. And then I started, you know, understanding concepts with like Buddhism and different mindfulness, more so like just the way, the other side of life. It was almost like I look at a lot of life in two hands. You're either following or doing something that is more on the path of like structure and order and like right, wrong, black, white, judgment, which is kind of how I view a lot of Christianity in those environments. Not everyone is in that exact same mind state, but a lot of them are, because it's this long, I don't even want to get into it, but yeah, it's essentially you're living in that sort of mindset where you're not being vulnerable, because if you're vulnerable, the church is going to judge you, and when the church judges you, you've got to come repent of your sins, and if you don't repent of your sins, you're not going to be a deacon anymore. That's how they do it. I've seen all of that up close. And so those people are not free. They are not free. And the other side of life is a life that is more dealing with the mindfulness aspect of life and having the awareness internally. And even if you're not practicing some sort of, you know, some sort of spiritual practice of any sorts, but like you can still have mindfulness and just having that awareness. You know, I feel like the Christian route is more stuck in the mind, and then the other side to it of different Eastern mysticism and different things, the different esoteric texts, the ancient texts that have, you know, been here and hidden for reasons, very, very obviously for reasons, because that is what allows a person to have self-sovereignty and control over their own life, is finding a route that is more just focused on your own self and not doing what others want you to do, and doing whatever the fuck you want to do because you want to do it, and not being told and conditioned what to do. That's where it just, when that is going on, you are not in control. You're being yanked around by your impulses and just fear and judgment and all these just horrible things. So not everyone has it like that, obviously, in that environment of Christianity and churches, but if you have some mental health, especially if you have some mental health issues and you're in that environment, you can get in a very, very downward, shameful cycle. And that's what I was in. And a lot of it was dealing with that pressure of a pastor's kid in a mega church, on top of the anxiety, on that plus the controlling house. All of that was just on me and just fucking me up constantly. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm sitting on top of this beautiful mountain, and appreciate you watching.